Welcome back to the TMNT 2012 Retrospective. In the previous video, I gave my thoughts on the first season of the 2012 Turtles and talked about how it came to be and all that good stuff. It was exciting for me because of the fact that I had never watched it before, despite being such a big fan of the 2003 series and going so in-depth on it in my videos. If you haven't seen part 1, I'd say it wouldn't hurt to go do that, because today we're talking about season 2. But before I even think about it, I'm feeling compelled to start googling something that seems completely unrelated to the video, but is actually super important, and the relevance of which should be evident by the end of the next minute. So let's see. Croissant? Yeah, that was me failing to get a nice French snack, but here's what I did to figure it out. I started with the home of the pastry, of course, France. I read all the books about France, about the French, the Eiffel Tower, French cafes, and the coveted baked good. Complete immersion. Think like the French, I thought. Man, I even took notes, see? But despite my efforts, it was an unsuccessful approach. So I thought, let's try the classic methods. Should be easy. I've got YouTube and movies and 30-day tutorials, a French course next semester, but it was so overwhelming, so I had to simplify. I turned to Babbel. It's a top language learning app, scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in 3 weeks. Lessons are designed by real language learning teachers, and the lessons prepare you to have practical conversations about travel, business, relationships, and more. They even have a lifetime subscription in case one day I decide I want to learn how to order an empanada or a schnitzel, since the lifetime subscription lets you switch between different languages. You can get 60% off during Babbel's Cyber Monday sale using the link in the description. But for now, I did it. Thanks to Babbel, it was no stress. I finally got my croissant. Oh, and about the relevance to the topic at hand, I lied. Now let's get into the show. The Turtles were right at home on Nickelodeon, as the first season of the new series was instantly successful. As I said in the previous video, every episode of the first season had gotten over 2 million viewers in the US alone. It got renewed for a second season just a few days after the series premiere in September of 2012. And it helped that the show was pretty good, too. I mean, I wasn't really sure what I was going to think of it when I started it a few weeks back, given that this is a kids show I didn't grow up with, so therefore I have no connection to it, but by the end of season 1 I thought it was a charming and funny show for all ages. But still, regardless of quality, it being a hit was something I'm sure the executives were pleased with. Viacom had gotten quite the bargain when they acquired the rights to the TMNT for just $60 million, because it was quickly paying for itself, as the show is just one fraction of the revenue streams for the TMNT. The real prize is in the never-ending amount of merchandise. One of the things that made TMNT so huge to begin with, and the reason it became the massive cartoon it did back in the 80s, was because of Playmates toys. The merchandising for that show pretty much revolutionized the whole toy cartoon industry. Playmates was the company that continued manufacturing TMNT stuff throughout each generation, which I went into in the 2003 retrospective. And they still have the Turtles licensed to this day. But I just wanted to highlight the 2012 era because of the first wave of them dropped a few months before the show, and as an 11-year-old fan, I was all over this. These were the last action figures I got invested in before I just lost interest in action figures altogether. But these were some high-quality ones from my recollection, lots of articulation and accessories and all that good shit. All the ones I did have currently sit in a box in the basement of my old house. I have a lot of nostalgia for these. I thought they were dope AF back in the day and always enjoyed watching YouTube videos from Pixel Dan and other toy channels about the ones I both did and didn't have yet. But what was less stellar was on the video game side of things. Konami had done all the games for the TMNT during the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, however the rights were given to Ubisoft for a few years until Activision was given the publishing rights for the TMNT games in 2012. There are a lot of mobile games based on the 2012 show, but sticking only to console games, there was first this game called TMNT Out of the Shadows on PS3 and 360. This game was digital only, so it became delisted once Activision didn't renew its license. However, I've had this game installed on my PS3 since like 2014, so I decided to quickly revisit it since I remember enjoying it as a basic Arkham clone. But this game got some pretty poor reception, and I can see why. It looks and runs like trash, and doesn't have very fun combat mechanics, and also really low production values. Also, it's only inspired by the art direction and concepts from the show. It's not trying to be a part of that universe, I don't think. As for games that were, the first game based on the 2012 show proper was even worse. I mean, to be fair, I played it for the first time for this video for about 7 minutes, specifically for this segment, but that was certainly more than enough. It's just a cheap tie-in game to a popular kids show and nothing more. Shovelware production values and repetitive combat, nothing worth looking at for longer than a few seconds. And then the third game, Danger of the Ooze, was a side-scroller that had fully animated cutscenes, which surprised me given the bar set by the previous games. But I did love that the title screen was an homage to one of the most famous TMNT comic covers. The intro of the show homages the original comic cover at the end, now that I mention it. But overall, I thought the 2003 series games were mediocre, but I'd play those any day before wanting to play these cheap nothing games. But But still, my point is that this show from very early on was quite popular, and like TMNT tradition, the powers behind it wasted no time in capitalizing on that revenue as much as humanly possible, regardless of how good or bad some of that shit actually was. But with figures and games flying off the shelves, and with the show being so popular, the stage was set for its second season, which began airing on October 12th of 2013 with Episode 1, The Mutation Situation. At the end of the first season, the Krang invasion with the Technodrome was halted by the Turtles in April, while Splinter learned that Shredder's daughter, Karai, was actually his own daughter, whom he presumed perished. The Krang and Shredder are both still out there, so at the start of Season 2 they're working together as the Krang are meant to deliver the Foot a shipment of mutagens so the Shredder can increase his mutant army ranks. The Turtles try and stop it, but in their reckless overconfidence, they cause the whole shipment of mutagen to fall into the city, which begins a citywide mutation issue, including transforming April's dad, who was only recently rescued from the Krang, into a mutant bat creature. When April finds out the Turtles basically caused this, she doesn't want to talk to them anymore, which sets the scene for Season 2. The Turtles deal with the outbreak of mutations and the fact that April doesn't want to be friends anymore, and the ongoing drama with the Foot. I was glad they just decided to dive into the story of the season because there are a lot of interesting plot lines in this season, so it makes sense to progress the story as much as possible in the first episode. Although the fact that I was interested in the main plot lines of Season 2 contributed to one of the nitpicks I had while watching it. People online don't speak highly of filler episodes, and I've defended the concept in the past because I think it can be a fun way to see the characters in their downtime. Though with this season in particular, I felt like that was something that got in the way of the story. You'll get an episode that's important to the plot, but then an episode that's just completely unrelated right after, and when you're interested in seeing what happens next, it does make the filler content feel like a pacebreaker. Particularly when I don't care for the episode in question, like say, Mazes and Mutants, which comes between a big 2-part episode and the episode where Stockman gets mutated. The premise is already kind of cliche as the Turtles play a role-playing game that becomes real life for 22 minutes. It just feels like something you've seen 100 other times before, and they don't really do anything new with the idea. Though the worst example was the Pizza Face episode, where there's an epidemic of pizza that comes alive and turns people into zombies that walk themselves into being turned into calzone that the big pizza monster wants to eat. And the episode ends with it being a dream Michelangelo had, or maybe not, but like, yeah, when that comes between two more important episodes, it does feel like a waste of time. Though my least favorite episode this season wasn't even filler. It was the Shell Acne episode where Michelangelo gets these ooze pimples, and it just was so disgusting that I didn't even want to look at it by the end. But back on subject, that's not to say these episodes that are not directly about Shredder and or the Krang are bad by default, because they're often really good, like when Raph's pet turtle gets turned into a villainous mutant named Slash. I liked this one because it showed how Raph's anger problems are a product of his actually being really sensitive and emotional, and his pet turtle was his one outlet for venting, and now it's turned into a villain. But you get rewarded for watching these smaller episodes when they eventually become roped into the larger episode. Slash, for example, goes from the villain of his debut episode to a supporting anti-hero when he teams up with the Neutralizer to fight the Krang in a later episode and then joins forces with the Turtles at the end. Most side episodes in this show offer some kind of meaningful anecdote for the characters they focus on, like the Rat King's return being one of the rare moments where Splinter takes center stage in a fight and asserts that his remaining humanity is his greatest strength. So yeah, my point is that the season doesn't have much in the way of episode duds, but I feel like the pacing was kind of slow because the important episodes got spaced out the way that they did. I was going to say that binging a show you've never seen before would cause this, however I think waiting week to week as a kid watching this actually would have made it worse. But I can't speak on that, obviously, because that's not how I experienced the show. Season 2 advances the series in many ways. Chief among them is how they changed the status quo somewhat frequently. For example, this season is one where Shredder decides to replace his human ninja army with Krang Tech robots, fusing the different iterations of the Foot Clan from previous versions together like the first season did with many other TMNT concepts. But this changes the show since it was a recurring plot point that the human ninjas were weak and pathetic and the robots are actually pretty strong and give the Turtles a run for their money, which makes the action scenes more interesting to watch. And with them being robots, it actually allows the action scenes to be more brutal as the Turtles can now cut through their enemies with their weapons, which again makes the action scenes more entertaining. A few episodes in, while April is still mad at the Turtles, she meets Casey Jones, who's also a teenager in this incarnation. While this is a much different Casey from any of the ones done before, he still retains the core DNA of the character by crushing on April and getting along with and occasionally butting heads with Raph, using various sports equipment to bash through bad guys as well, just with the personality of a teen in this one. Casey is voiced by Josh Peck, and he bounces off with Mae Whitman as April and Sean Astin as Raph pretty well. He's integrated well into the core cast pretty quick. Although, Casey and April's dynamic gets mixed in with the existing plotline of Don having a crush on April, and this merited some extra commentary. Something I've come to realize is this entire subplot is one that is divisive at the least. I had said I thought it was a decent addition to the show before. The reason was that the goal was to make the Turtles feel like teens, and to that end, they were successful. But I am totally with everyone in saying that it's cringe city because it is. Now that it becomes a love triangle in Season 2, it remains cringe throughout. Now, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you. On the one hand, yeah, the writers nailed down a teen mutant turtle nerd, but since Dawn is repeatedly given the lesson that there's no chance and she's not interested, the gag starts to overstay its welcome and gets to the point we just want to hit the mute button during scenes like this.
Now that it's the end of the world and all, again, I figured I'd better just...
I guess this is a limitation that's come up from my not having watched this before. I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm just reacting as I go. Guess we'll see if it gets weirder and or more annoying in the future. And no, that was not an invitation to spoil every plot point in the show in the comments. I don't know why people do that when saying you don't know what happens yet. Anyway, the April plotline I was even more iffy on was the reveal that April is like the chosen one of the Krang. They've been planning their Earth takeover from Dimension X for thousands of years and have been slowly perfecting their mutagen in that time, and they need some specific human DNA to do it. They were experimenting on April's mother, and that made April the person they needed to complete their mutagen, and it also means she has some dormant alien superpowers. It's not that this is contrived or anything, it was clearly built up to from the beginning of the show. I just felt like it was a little much. I like how the turtles in this, as far as I'm aware, are just a product of a pure accident, but then end up being the ones to fight the Krang. But them coincidentally stumbling upon the Krang chosen one as they were capturing her on their first night out of the sewers is a pretty massive coincidence. And then she happens to befriend the turtles and is crucial in their goal to stop the Krang. It's not impossible, it's just a lot. But as I was saying earlier, this season heavily revolves around mutations. It's something one of the showrunners said in the lead up to the series' release, that the TMNT brand is the undisputed champion of mutations. It's something I've never thought about before, but it is a series well known for cool monster designs, and the 2012 series really leaned into that because with this mutagen being a main thing, you can just come up with whatever designs you want to. The intro even gets an update halfway through the season to include all the new bad guys. For starters, Dog Pound is given a secondary mutation and is called Razar, a callback to the second TMNT movie. Or how Stockman gets mutated and becomes a fly monster, which, as per usual in this show, takes the 1987 Stockman who became a mutant fly and fused it with an otherwise more regular depiction of the character. Then they just introduce new mutants like Tiger Claw, this super tough assassin that goes toe-to-toe with Splinter in an episode, and even holds his own against him, which made him actually kind of threatening too. I thought it was funny how Tiger Claw got banished to the 1987 Turtles dimension at the end of an episode. They even got the OG Turtles back to voice the cameo.
You know what that means, right, Leonardo?
We take down the creepy crawler, and then we order pizza. Yes! Turtle power! Cowabunga!
But then they actually bring it up again when Tiger Claw returns in a few episodes' time, which I also thought was funny. But more significantly, Karai gets mutated into a snake monster towards the end of the season. I thought Season 2 handled this arc in a pretty good way. It felt like every Karai episode advanced the story in an important way, like her pretending to believe Splinter is her real father to set a trap for the Turtles and Splinter, only to actually be convinced and learn the truth as she tries to turn on Shredder only to be imprisoned for a few episodes. I just thought this was pretty interesting drama as a longtime fan of the series, since you just don't know what direction they're going to take it in as the episodes go on, since it's such a new story. It shows an interesting side of every character, like how Splinter is usually reserved and collected, but in episodes involving Karai, he's at his most eager to get involved for obvious reasons, and can be easy to anger in those episodes, even at the Turtles or April. And then Shredder is actually upset when Karai is turned into a monster, despite emotionally abusing her throughout her entire life and kidnapping her as a baby. Maybe he's upset because he can't manipulate an actual monster like he could a person, or maybe he felt some shred of attachment to her.
And now I would just like to add mid-edit, well, I just realized that that was not supposed to be a pun, but the way I delivered it made it sound like I was like super proud of the epic pun I just came up with, but that was not a pun because it wasn't even in the script to begin with. I was going off script just now like I am right now. So back to the script.
I'm just saying that I thought these were intriguing dynamics. Though while I'm on the subject of Karai's story, I'm pretty confused about why the writers introduced Karai with the story of Leo having a crush on her in Season 1. I mean, they already knew they were going in this direction as early as Season 1 since the twist is revealed in Season 1. Leo and Karai were not love interests before this in other incarnations, just friends who were on opposite sides. So, I'm just saying, I don't know why they even bothered, because that element is dropped pretty quick to make room for the narrative of Karai being Splinter's daughter. But all these plot points lead to a pretty cool finale episode where a lot of things go down. For example, the Krang finally find the Turtles' lair and destroy it, separating Splinter from the Turtles. The Krang complete their invasion of Earth that was thwarted in the previous season finale and start mutating the entire city. Along the way, there are some cool Easter eggs too, like how the Earth Protection Force arrives to fight the Krang, which I believe is the first 2003 series concept brought into the 2012 show. I know this show eventually does its own take on Agent Bishop, so I'm curious if there will be a connection there. I also thought it was a cool twist how April's friend Irma was a Krang spy. You don't think anything of her while watching this show besides it being a reference to Irma from the '87 Turtles show. But no, it's a Krang spy, and that was actually kind of foreshadowed in this silly filler episode about a ghost spirit that lived inside an artifact. It was drawing on the power of April and Irma to give it a physical form. Somehow that detail washed right over me when I first saw it. During this finale, Leo was separated from his brothers, and they used this as a chance to do the Leo gets ambushed by the Foot and tossed through the window at April's story as well. Splinter almost getting killed by Shredder and living thanks to Karai, while the Turtles, April, and Casey escape the city and go up north, setting up the farmhouse arc for Season 3 and ending Season 2 on a pretty exciting cliffhanger. As I said, they crammed in a ton of action and status quo shifts in this 2-part final episode, and I was definitely with it while watching. It made me pretty excited for Season 3. Guess that's the perk of having a popular show. You already know you're getting renewed, so you can keep the story going. The show was renewed for a 3rd season on February 26th of 2013, when the series was only 16 episodes into the run of its 1st season. As I said up top, this version of the TMNT was quite popular. The fans didn't have to wait too long for it to wrap up, though. There was a few months break between episodes 22 and 23 of Season 2, but Season 3 just picked up the next week after the Season 2 finale on October 3rd of 2014. But that's what we're going to be discussing in the next video. At this point, I'm more than sold on the show, so I'm excited to check out Season 3 and see how they handled the farmhouse arc and Return to New York arc. But I'll admit, something I'm kind of afraid of with this one is that with the whole farmhouse thing going on and Karai being a mutant snake, I do wonder if that means the story will more or less be put on hold for several episodes straight, or if there will be meaningful additions to the story. But only time will tell. So I hope everyone's looking forward to Part 3 as much as I am. But that's all the time we have for today, so I'll close the video by saying the same thing I always do. You've seen everything. Go outside.